Morning, President Biden insisting he will remain on the 2024 ticket, even as more congressional Democrats say he should. In fact, after days of being sidelined by COVID, Biden's team is planning potential trips to Georgia and Texas once he bounces back. Axios reports that senior Democratic officials are urging Biden to make a decision on his future this weekend. But many Biden officials, including the president himself, have indicated that the matter is already settled. Joining us now, Principal Deputy Campaign Manager for Biden-Harris 2024, Quinton Fulks.
Quinton, it's good to see you again, my friend. I want to start with some comments from Nancy Pelosi at the Unity Dinner in North Carolina last night.
Elections are not about rewarding you for what you have done. They're about what you're going to do next, right? What you're going to do next. We can prove, as President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris did, as we did as the Democratic majority, that we know how to do the job.
So Nancy Pelosi says we know how to do the job. This is not about what we did, what we're going to do. Then why does everyone believe still within the Democratic Party that Joe Biden cannot do the job? And we just was on with Congressman Smith, who made it very clear. And now you have, others coming out saying the same. Joe Biden cannot do the job. How do you break this, man? How do you turn this around? The president said, I'm not going anywhere. So why haven't people gotten that message?
Look, we are going to listen to voters. I want to be very, very clear about this, Michael. It is a privilege to sit around and play games with what is going on right now. At the end of the day, the voters who have the most at stake in this election and the ones who will suffer the most under a second Donald Trump presidency are not saying that to us. If they start saying that, then we have a problem, but they're not. Black voters that are worried about jobs and the progress that has been made under President Biden and Vice President Harris and Donald Trump's racist agenda, they are not thinking that or saying that. Women who are worried about reproductive freedoms, they are not saying that. Women like Hadley Duvall, they are not saying that. Latino voters sitting at home wondering why Donald Trump put the architect of family separation on stage with him at his convention, they are not saying that. And so while we respect the work that some of these individuals who are calling for the president to step aside have helped Democrats do, and he deeply appreciates that. We are going to continue to listen to the backbone and the base of the Democratic Party when it comes to deciding the future of the Democratic Party. And our campaign is on course to continue to communicate with these individuals. Joe Biden has said he is staying in. Our campaign has said he is staying in. I don't know how many more times we can say it, but the matter to us is the voters. They are going to decide this election, and that is who our campaign is focused on communicating with.
So, Quinton, then what is the conversation with these members of Congress who do seem to be, as I've been describing it, resolute in their opposition to the president's candidacy? The president is also resolute at this moment in time, as you are reiterating here, that he is staying in this race. So then what is the conversation? Because, I mean, Congressman Smith, who was just on with us, noted that part of his impetus to come forward is because he felt brushed off, to paraphrase, if you will, or dismissed by the White House when he called and registered his concerns. So are you all essentially going to plow forward and with these members of Congress continuing to just come out and call for the president's removal? Or is there some kind of mea culpa that could happen here?
Well, look, every single moment that we spend talking about this, we are not spend talking about Donald Trump and Project 2025, the fact that they want a nationwide abortion ban, the fact that they want to get rid of government agencies like the Department of Education, the fact that they want to bring back family separation and mass deportation of people across this country. And so our message to these members is that every moment that we spend talking about this, we move further and further away from the goal. And we have to start communicating with American voters about what's at stake in this election. And as Speaker Emerita Pelosi said, the future of this country. And the voters that have the most at stake understand that the future of this country will be very, very, very bad for them if Donald Trump ever regains power in the White House. And so I do not think our campaign nor the president is being dismissive of the concerns. But when the question repeatedly is, are you staying in the race? We have given an answer to that question. But if the question becomes, how are we going to win? Let's talk about Donald Trump. Let's talk about his vision for this country and how he's going to run it into the ground and hurt Americans, the ones that the Democratic Party represent. Then we are open to that discussion. And so we're going to continue communicating with voters as we have been since the beginning of this and using the apparatus that this campaign has built since last April to do that.
Well, Quinton, let's talk about Donald Trump, because he was at a rally in Michigan just last night, really trying to distance himself from Project 2025. Take a listen.
Like some on the right, severe right, came up with this Project 25, and I don't even know. I mean, some of them I know who they are, but they're very, very conservative, just like you have. They're sort of the opposite of the radical left, okay? You have the radical left and you have the radical right, and they come up with this, I don't know what the hell it is, it's Project 25.
I'm going to borrow some language from my friend Michael Steele. That's just a straight up lie. And so I wonder, as he tries to hide the ball, how you actually hold his feet to the fire and make him own this.
Look, we continue to talk about just how much more extreme he has gotten since he left the White House. We thought it couldn't get worse than it was in 2020 and what we went through for during that campaign and the 4 years that he was president. But we see that he's only become more extreme. He's talking about the severe right. He is the severe right. Now it's not just abortion. It's IVF. It's family planning. It's monitoring pregnancies. It's putting women in jail. It's black jobs. He's come back with a vengeance. And now, because of the Supreme Court that he largely appointed have given him immunity, the things that he's saying he's going to implement. He's talking about the architects of Project 2025. They are people he appointed in his cabinet and in high-profile positions. That plan also calls for an institution to basically train people, Trump loyalists, to be put in government. Donald Trump is lying. It's all he knows how to do. He is only in this campaign for revenge, retribution, and to get back at his political enemies. And he will have the ability to do that if he gets in office. And so from now until Election Day, we have to continue to communicate about the stakes of this election and that Donald Trump will roll back all of the progress that he's made. And worse than that, he does not have a plan moving forward for anybody in this country except the wealthiest of big corporations and people who will pledge extreme loyalty to him, like J.D. Vance.
Quinton, on the broader point of sort of refocusing the campaign strategy now and making this about Trump, how do you feel about where you are with your donor class? You got your base, and I agree with you. Your base is, every bit of data I've seen, the base is consolidated around the president. They've not fractured from him. And even in national polling, if some in the media would really be honest about where this race is, this is a 2 to 3 point national race right now. Despite everything that's happened, all the noise from the Smiths and you know, the Joe Manchins, you know, jumping ship, but he's an independent and who really cares? So at the end of the day, you still get back to the point between your base and your donors. You had NBC noting that the vice president did a donor call in which basically donors walked away feeling frustrated and annoyed. Look, you don't know, and unless you were on the call to really get an appreciation of how that went. But these are the narratives that are coming out of these meetings that I don't think help. How do you shore up that aspect of your campaign as you're also trying to lock and load and hold in place your base?
Well, look, I think that they go hand in hand. I think it's continuing to do the work that we've been doing for our base and show the strength of our campaign. You know, over 1,200 staffers in battleground states, over 300 offices in the battleground states to show that we are communicating and using resources that people graciously donate to this campaign, whether major donor or grassroots, to this campaign. They go hand in hand. Folks want to be reassured. They want to be a part of something that they know is working. Our campaign is going to continue to have these conversations, both with donors, elected officials who want to have them, but most importantly, with voters on the ground about what's at stake. And so, look, I look at this as sort of a tripod, and we have to have a number of, all the legs have to be strong for it to work. And we are doing everything that we can every single day to make sure that we are accomplishing that goal. I think that the grassroots fundraising on this campaign has been incredibly strong. We saw that during the first week of this month alone, we had the strongest grassroots week that we've ever had. And so we feel optimistic about where we are. We are going to continue to use every single resource and dollar that comes into this campaign right back on the ground or on the airwaves communicating with voters about what's at stake and the issues that I laid out here earlier.
Quentin, we have short time, but the president has said he will be back on the campaign trail. He looks forward to getting back on the campaign trail this upcoming week. He has a meeting separately at the White House scheduled with Prime Minister Netanyahu, among other things, again, getting back into the business as he recovers from and comes out of COVID-19. I hear your message about y'all have answered the question, but there are so many reports, and frankly, I feel for your position. But there are so many reports that the president and his team are considering, and that the president is talking, and that the family is considering. Just the people would like to know, and I don't think anybody would frankly be surprised if you said like it was a discussion. Has there been any kind of discussion about if he should stay in this race? And if not, what do you say to all of these reports that, I mean, you know, frankly, one outlet saying something is like, that's a one-off, but every single outlet has it.
It is false. And I think that it is false to continue to try to gin up this narrative. Joe Biden has said he is in this race. He is in this race to win it. He is instructing us to continue to carry out a plan to make sure that we are communicating it to as many voters as possible. Actions speak louder than words, although sometimes in this case, I wish that our words would speak louder so that people would stop asking this question. But we are doing both. The president has doubled down and said that he is running in this race to win it and that he is not going anywhere. We look forward to our convention in Chicago, but we are also continuing to communicate with voters and showing through action that the president is doing it. And he is, as well as the vice president, with their travel, hitting every single blue wall state, heading to Las Vegas, to the NAACP conference. Joe Biden is running for president of the United States, and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will be reelected in November.
All right, Quentin, folks, I don't know what they're paying you, my friend, but I can tell you it is not enough. Thank you very much for your time.